Hey friends, it's Cassie. Welcome back for another video here on my YouTube channel. We are finally back with the fun Fold Fridays. Thank you for your patience. My June was craziness, but I am back. So yeah, we are going to be using some Miss Ink stamps for our project today. I've brought in some of the Alice line. I don't have it all, but when I went back to the page and looked at the Alice line, I was just like, yeah, I want so much more. Those are just a few of the Alice line stamps. There's so many more, and we're just going to use a couple. But I love this line of stamps. Like I said, I think I'm going to have to go back and kind of take a look and possibly pick out some more. And then we're also going to use this background. This is called the Meadow Scene Builder. We've got a couple of stencils. We've got the Wonky Checker and the Vintage Keyhole. And there are more in the Alice line as well. And I'm going to have a link down below so that you can go check out that Alice line if you are at all interested. I love the sayings, the sentiments, the images are darling. It's just a great, great line, which is why I think I really need to have it. So I'm going to start off by spraying some squeezed lemonade through the keyhole stencil onto some watercolor cardstock. I'm not really concerned about making sure that it gets everywhere. I just wanted a base for my background, and then I did heat set that, and that's how that looks. It looks pretty good. I love the splatteriness of it. It's kind of fun, gives a little bit of texture. And then I'm going to bring in my Tonic platform, and I'm going to tape that down, and then I'm going to use my magnets to keep my stencil down. And you do want to use a piece of 6x6 cardstock. You could cut it down already if you really wanted to, because we are going to trim down part of that, but it does need to be, at least one edge needs to be 6 inches. So I've brought in that Wonky Checker, and I've brought in some Guppy ink, and I'm going to go ahead and use a blending buddy to blend that color all around that background. Don't need it to be really dark or even completely even. I love making backgrounds like this. They just look like a beautiful, distressed, fun background, at least for me. That's kind of my jam. So I like how that looks. We're going to clean up our mess, and then I'm going to set that down and spritz a little bit of water on it, let that sit for a few seconds. It's just going to make some of that ink bleed a little bit, and then we can wipe some of that up. And then we'll want to heat set that before we move on to the next part, but this is how I'm going to start. We've got our cardstock. We're going to go down to normal speed here. You're going to need your cardstock to measure 5.5 inches by 11 inches, and then you're going to score it in 4 sections. So I've brought in my Fiskars paper trimmer. This is just the easiest one for me. I'm going to bring in a stylus as well, and you'll see what I'm talking about if you don't know what a stylus is. It's just, and I've had this stylus for 20 years. I've used it for so many things. We're going to start off by scoring at 1 3/4 inches. That's your first score. All right. Once you get that score done, we're going to move that paper down to 3.5 inches, and we're going to score that as well. Once again, just using that stylus. Then we're going to move down to 5 1/4. That's your third score line. As you can see, we are going evenly. Each is 1 3/4. And then our next and final score line is at 7 inches. That's the last one you're going to do. All right, I'm going to move my paper trimmer out of the way. Those are the only score lines we need to do for this. And then we're going to start doing some folding. Now I know when you do your folding and your scoring, you should usually fold in where it's got the bump, but we're just going to work with what we got because I didn't feel like flipping the paper each time. And so I'll use my bone folder. That'll just ensure each one of those. Fold it like a card first, then you fold back, then you fold in, and then you fold back. It's an accordion type fold. And so that's how that's going to look. And this is going to be fun. I love the end result so much. And part of that is really because of the stamps that I'm using. And just this whole background, I had so much fun creating. It had been a little bit since I was creating, simply because, yeah, so much going on in June. So now you're going to cut your 6x6 down. You need it to be 6 inches on one side, and then we're going to cut this to 5 1/4. So I'm going to trim off some of that excess white, but I'm not worried about the white on the 6-inch side. That's fine with me, or not the 6-inch side, but the one side. That's not a big deal to me. So now this measures 5 1/4 by 6 inches, and now we're going to equally trim these down. We're going to cut down to 1.5 inch for each of these pieces. So each piece will end up measuring 5 1/4 by 1.5 inches. So that's perfect. And if you were following along, which you are, I'm sure, that's going to, each one of those is going to fit perfectly into what we just scored into our big piece of cardstock. But I'm not done with these pieces. I kind of want to mask the big white edge a little bit. So I'm going to bring in some Remember Me ink by Simon Early Create, and I'm just going to use my blending buddy, and I am going to blend that Remember Me all along those edges. Where that white edge is, I'm going to be a little bit more intense with that color, and then it's really not going to be as noticeable. You're really going to focus more on that inside design that's going on there. And I'm so happy with how these are turning out. So I'll do that for all 4 of those, just the same process. And then when we get to that last one, there you go. And then I'm going to line those up perfectly, you know, the same, how they were cut apart, because I do want it to go coherent, you know, from one side to the next. So if I were to tape all those back together, they would all line up. I'm going to use a little bit of gold paint that I have. And a friend of mine, Kim, pointed out that I've had this gold paint for forever. So you find yourself a good gold paint or whatever kind of paint, and you're going to be able to use it for a very, very long time. And you just buy it once, basically. So now we can adhere these down to the accordion pieces. I'm going to use a little bit of liquid glue, and then I'm going to adhere each one of those into that accordion. And then you'll have a nice little blue border all along those edges. And it goes into where we've blended. And then take a look at how pretty that looks when it's open. I love it. I'm happy. All right, so we'll set that off to the side to dry, and then we are going to go ahead and color our next piece. I did bump this up in speed to about 4 times. I stamped out that little Cheshire cat, and we've stamped out our Alice. Those come from the Alice stamp set, and as I said, there's a whole line, and I'll have a link down to the whole line down below because you're definitely going to want to go check that out. There are so many great stamp sets with so many great sentiments, and I showed you just the few that I have, but like I said, I think I'm going to have to go get a few more. I stamped each of these images out using some blackout ink, and I did that onto some Express It cardstock. It's just a good color a good combo if you're trying to do alcohol markers, which I am. I am using my Olo markers to do my coloring, and I've done my best to put all those colors up on the screen for you. If you've noticed this time, if you've watched me at all, usually I go light to dark. This time I did dark to light, and I think that worked out pretty good. There's a couple spots where I had to do, you know, add my dark later, but I am trying to practice on doing both, you know, light to dark, dark to light, just to expand my skills a little bit. But again, you do what makes you happy and what you're most comfortable with. And then we will finish up our last little bit of putting some extra color on her face. I wanted there to be a little bit more dimension on her skin, and then we'll blend that out. Now there are matching dies now for these stamp sets. There were not matching dies when I got these stamp sets before, but now that I know that there are matching dies, I may just have to go and buy them. Otherwise, fussy cutting works just fine. All right, the next step, we're slowing this down again. I need a piece of cardstock that measures 3 inches by 6 inches. And this is what our little Alice and our cat are going to go on. And you can tell I've already scored this, but we do need to score this at 3 inches. So that's going to basically fold it in half. And I am using watercolor cardstock for this simply because of how I want to do up this background. So yeah, 3 inches by 6 inches scored at 3 inches. It'll be a perfect little square when it's all folded up. We're bringing in that meadow scene builder. And like I said, there in this Alice line, I don't know if I mentioned, but there is a whole stamp set with the mushrooms in the background, which would have been perfect for this. But this is what I have, so this is what we're doing. And I did fold it in half, and I put it inside my Mini Misty, put my stamp down on top of that. And then we're going to bring in that Guppy ink that we used earlier over our wonky checker stencil. And I'm going to stamp that a couple times. I'm trying to make this match-ish to our background that we've already made. And I want that to be sort of subtle in the background, which is why I didn't stamp it in black and color it. Now I'm going to bring in that squeezed lemonade again, and we'll spray that over the top. Didn't feel like bringing in the whole box, so I'll just bring in a rag that I have. Love it. Kind of makes some of that Guppy bleed a little bit, which is perfect. And then we'll make sure that that is heat set before we move on to using the Remember Me and our blending buddy all around those edges. So yeah, this is all going to match pretty well with what we've already done. and the cohesiveness of this card will go well. I'm going to fold it in half then, and then we'll add to both sides just because I wanted to. And then we'll clean up our mess, do a little spritzing of some more of that splatter on there. We'll go a little splatter crazy later on, but it's fine. And then I'm going to bring in this piece of white cardstock. This measures 3 3/4 by 5 1/4 inches, so there will be a white border around all the edges of that. And then when I fold this up, I do get some of that gold paint on there. I'm going to go with it. You know, I didn't plan to do any splatter on the inside. I tried to wipe it away, which obviously wasn't going to work. And so I thought, instead of trash it, let's just splatter. It is what it is. You know, you guys know me. If you watch me at all, typically I am the person that I'm not going to throw most things away. Most things are salvageable. You just kind of have to work with it. Very rarely have I had to scrap something simply. I mean, I've been frustrated, but I like to just go with it. It's paper. It's not a big deal. And these are homemade cards. We'll put that back into our MISTI, and I've brought out 2 sentiments from that stamp set that is called Wonderland Wisdom, which has so many cute sentiments in it. I'm going to ink those up with that VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. I've used that many, many times. It is such a crisp black ink, and so I'll stamp that a couple times. That's why this is so perfect for sentiments. It's also good for watercolor, but it's a pigment ink. So also keep in mind that it's going to be wet for a little while. So if you're concerned about that, heat set it before you touch it. Now we're ready to attach down Alice and that Cheshire Cat. And then we're just going to use some foam tape on the back of that to add a little extra dimension. And then I'm getting ready to glue this in. And in order to do that, I'm just kind of measuring where I need that to be. And then I'm going to slow this down. I am just using some liquid glue on those edges. That's it. Just use it on the edges. And then where I wanted my piece to be, I wanted it to line up with the white from the background. So I'm sticking this inside there, pushing that first piece in, closing the rest of the accordion, and attaching this part of Alice to the other part of that accordion. And then you'll notice later on it doesn't open completely flat, but I'm totally okay with that. You could work it if you want to do that differently. I've let that sit for a bit so that that glue is nice and dry, but I am so happy with how this card turned out. I wish I had tried making this in a bigger card. You could change up your dimensions however you need to do it. Maybe if you have a piece of 12 by 12 cardstock, you could cut it up to make it fit and work better. As you can see, that's not going to open flat. I'm okay with it. It'll stand up really, really nicely though, so you'll see that. And then, yeah, I love how this card turned out. And I would love to know what you think of it. Is it something that you would give a try to? I plan to make more. All right, if you like this video, hit that like button. Definitely consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And as always, I'll see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.